After the war, from an economic standpoint, Germany picked up itself quite quickly, as the gross national product had been growing significantly year by year, and unemployment was nearly non-existent by 1960. This was about the time when Mercedes was eyeing to launch an ultra-luxury model, A600, but lacked a proper engine for it. With a warehouse full of various straight sixes, Daimler was replacing an old and retiring Adenauer with a new, much larger, luxurious, and incomparably heavier car, scaling nearly 2.5 tons. It gained the Grand Mercedes nickname, being made also in a longer version and optionally armored. The shortest and lightest 600 had over 5.5 meters and weighed 2,475 kilograms. A serious amount of torque was needed to propel such a behemoth, and the time had come to dust off an 8-cylinder idea once again. The new power plant was named the M100, and right out of the box it was a 6.3-liter single overhead cam engine. Although it had a couple of rivals, the M100 was capable of much better performance. It would smoke a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud too, and could power its very power-draining hydraulic system on board of the Grand Mercedes at the same time. The 150-bar system that controlled windows, seats, sunroof, doors, boot lid, and later even a suspension required about 50 horsepower from the engine. Breaking the M100 into pieces, it was built in-house by Daimler, who knows a thing or two from aircraft engine manufacture. It was a brand new motor and the first automotive 8-cylinder after World War II by Benz. In fact, there were mostly only straight 8-cylinders prior to the M100. The bare engine block was cast of iron. The short block consisted of forged parts, a crankshaft with 5 cabs, conrods, and even pistons. On top of that were aluminum chain-driven heads, housing 2 valves per cylinder and a single cam bank. Intake valves were nitrided, and exhaust valves were filled with sodium for superior cooling, sitting in hardened valve seats. Valve stems were chrome-plated for an additional reduction of wear and friction. All those engines were hand-built, as were the cars, and fed with Daimler-developed mechanical fuel injection. The air-fuel mixture would then be burned in wedge-shaped combustion chambers. Each engine had to be exposed to a 265-minute long bench testing, 40 of which were under full load. It was marketed with an output of 250 horsepower and 503 Nm of torque. A 4-speed automatic transmission was standard equipment, and using a 2.82-to-1 final drive, fully occupied 600 could drive at 200 km/h with ease. At the time, a man named Erich Waxenberger had been working for Daimler for about a decade. Mercedes faced criticism from respected automotive journalists in the 1960s. "You build lots of slow cars, you are getting old, Erich," addressed by editor-in-chief of Auto, Motor und Sport, Heinz Ulrich Wieselmann. Waxenberger considered this as an inspiration and thought about developing something flashier than a lethargic 6-cylinder granny mobiles. Previously test driving prototypes, Waxenberger later worked in the chassis development department, which allowed him to pursue his dreams. In 1966, he was eyeing the possibility of stuffing the M100 into a 250 SL. Knowing the dimensions of the W113 and the M100, it was obviously a tough task to accomplish, but he managed to do it on his own. Waxenberger would then test drive the car, pass under an office of a Rudolf Uhlenbaut, who recognized strange noises of the SL, giving away the V8 under the hood. It made the Pagoda very front-heavy, and with its rear swing axle being phased out, it remained just a prototype that was later destroyed. It allegedly managed to clock the Nordschleife on racing tires in 10 minutes and 30 seconds. Regardless, Uhlenbauer was immediately carried away by the idea of a powerful V8 in a more compact body, and after various iterations, it became a reality in the W109 chassis. A factory sleeper, or a hot rod one could say. In 1968, the car would show its gloss and power at Geneva Auto Show. The following numbers may not sound all that impressive in 2022, but being a 1.7-ton heavy limousine, it was capable of driving at 220 km per hour, and a 0 to 100 km per hour time was achieved in 6.7 seconds. Let's just say there was no other four-door as fast as the 300 SEL 6.3, and even some Lamborghini or Ferraris of the time would struggle to keep up. However, the Germans were not done with the M100. Yet in 1967, something special was being prepared by a new tuning company founded by Mercedes engineers. It would become famous as AMG, and they turned the 6.3 to a whole new level. The engine received 170mm cylinder bores, 4mm wider pistons, hydraulic valve lifters, and a new mechanical fuel injection system, the Bosch Cagetronic. The final displacement was 6,834 cc. Although the M100 was never meant to be a racing engine, the 6.8 changed that, and with a redesigned oiling system with a dry sump, it certainly became very capable. The engine could now sit lower and held over 11 liters of oil inside the right fender, about double cylinder heads. All the headports were polished. There were different cams and valves of the same size. The OEM internals would remain and received a weight shave-off. A new intake with a MAF sensor was added. Eventually the power increased from 250 to 428 horsepower and torque up from 500 to 608 Nm. AMG used a damaged SEL 6.3 for a racing conversion, and it was nicknamed Red Pig. In German, Rote Sau. The engine weighed about 340 kilograms and was paired to a 5-speed ZF manual gearbox and a 70% limited slip differential. It kept the standard twin-circuit braking system with a new set of Ferrado pads. Tires were mounted on 10 and 12-inch wide front and rear magnesium wheels. Allegedly, there was the stock air suspension with stiffer air bellows and Bilstein shocks alongside thicker sway bars. Initially, the public did not take the Red Pig seriously. Even guys at Mercedes were skeptical, and nobody could understand what this 1.6-ton super sedan was capable of. A class victory in the 24 Hours of Spa in 1971, and if it did not need to pit as often because of its ridiculous fuel and tire consumption, it would certainly place itself before the first Finnish Ford Capri. Amongst all those lightweight BMWs and Alphas, it was a huge success for the first baby of AMG. The output of the factory 6.8-liter grew from 250 to 286 horsepower compared to the 6.3, with a 10% increase of torque, up to 550 Nm. North Americans would receive a 250 horsepower version due to more stringent emission regulations. It became a successor of the 300 SEL 6.3, placed into a 1975 450 SEL 6.9 with a 3-speed automatic. Brock Yates, a long-time executive editor of Car and Driver, wondered about the durability and reliability of the M100 and decided to put the 450 SEL 6.9 to a challenge. 40 laps at Road Atlanta, which equal about 100 miles. When you think about it, that's a tough task to complete, not just for a 2-ton heavy machine, but for any factory road car. After finishing the job in an hour and 20 minutes at an average speed of over 115 km per hour, the 6.9 would happily purr with a normal hissing sound of a readjusting hydraulic suspension, behaving completely flawless like it was a walk in the park. While the 6.3 was an engineering marvel, the 6.9 took it to the next level, with a much superior lubrication system and hydraulic lifters which made the engine nearly maintenance-free for the first several tens of thousand kilometers. Allegedly, it would allow for 20,000 kilometer oil changes, also thanks to the large volume of the oil itself. The decision to put the M100 into a smaller chassis turned out as the right move. The 300 SEL 6.3 sold much better than the 600, and later even more of the 450 SEL 6.9s were handed to customers. Despite the 1973 oil crisis, over 1,800 of them found their owners in North America. Erich Waxenberger retired in 1996 after long 43 years in Mercedes-Benz and sadly died in 2017 at an age of 86. His very first project was the legendary 300 SL, and the last one was an ML class. However, this story may be one of the most resonant of Waxenberger's background. Mercedes knew him as a man who always found a way.